February 1692. The winter is tight-fisted and mean, the kind that settles in bones and in thoughts. In a wooden house in Salem village, two young girls shake, cry out, and say they feel pinches from hands no one can see. A minister's prayers fill the room. Neighbors whisper the word that has stalked their fears for years: witchcraft. In the months ahead, 20 people will be executed, others will die in jail, and an entire community will learn how easily fear turns neighbor against neighbor. But the dark truth behind the Salem Witch Trials isn't a story about magic. It is about power, scarcity, rivalry, and what happens when a court decides that invisible dreams count as evidence. Life here is hard. The Puritans believe the world is a battlefield between God and Satan, that every sickness or crop failure may be a sign of sin. The village is split in more ways than one. There is Salem village, mostly farms, and constant worry about debts and harvests, and there is Salem town by the harbor, growing richer from trade. Old wars on the frontier have left people traumatized, rumors of raids and the French Catholic threat are never far from their minds. When life is this uncertain, it is easy to think the devil is close. It is also easy to look for someone to blame. The minister of Salem village, Samuel Parris, has his own tensions with his congregation over money and authority. In his home are young Betty Parris and his niece, Abigail Williams. Their strange fits draw attention, and soon other young people begin to show the same convulsions and cries. Doctors find no cause. Ministers pray. Pressure rises: if there is a spiritual cause, who is afflicting them? In a small room with too many eyes watching, the girls name names. The first are women on the edges of village respectability: Sarah Good, poor and often begging; Sarah Osborne, locked in disputes over property and inheritance; and Tituba, an enslaved woman in Parris's household. When questioned, they deny it. The magistrates lean in. The village leans in. The pressure is relentless. Tituba, under coercion, tells a story that explodes through Salem: visions of strange creatures, tall man in black, a devil's book with names in it. She speaks of specters that travel and torment. Whether this is survival, a shield against worse punishments, or words shaped by the expectations of her interrogators, her story does something decisive: it gives the panic a script. The community now has a way to explain what it fears, and the officials have a way to prosecute it. The idea of spectral evidence takes hold. If someone claims to see your spirit tormenting them, that testimony can be used against you, even if you are miles away. In a society that believes Satan is real and active, that kind of claim feels reasonable. The circle of accusations widens. Once a person is named, their friends and relatives are pulled into the whirlpool. People remember odd remarks, old grudges, and petty slights. They bring them forward as proof. The afflicted cry out in court from sudden pricks and pinches, and judges take it seriously. The jails fill, not only in Salem but in nearby towns, Ipswich, Boston, and more. Chains and iron grow expensive. Families sell what they have to pay jailer fees. Underneath the public drama, there is a map of rivalries and interests. Salem village is riven by a feud between families like the Putnams, who favor the minister and the old agrarian order, and the Porters and their allies, closer to commerce in Salem town. Old land disputes and inheritance fights lace the countryside like tight wires. Some of the accused are inconvenient people in those fights: outspoken women, quarrelsome neighbors, or simply those who stand on land others want. In a world where a court can take your property when you are condemned, accusation can carry an invisible profit. Still, the trials need law to proceed, and law arrives. In May 1692, Governor William Phips establishes a special court for witchcraft cases, the Court of Oyer and Terminer. Chief Justice William Stoughton dominates it. The judges accept spectral evidence and use tests, like having the accused touch an afflicted person to see if the fits stop. When the afflicted fall quiet on cue, the court nods. The theater of the courtroom carries the people along. The judges believe they are doing God's work, and when the afflicted writhe and scream as a defendant looks at them, it seems to confirm everything. Bridget Bishop is the first to be condemned and hanged. The message is stark: this is real, this is happening, and the gallows will be busy. More trials follow, and many who insist on their innocence find that innocence is not a safe defense. Confession is rewarded, denial invites the rope. A confession fits the story the court has accepted, and a confessed which can implicate others. The faster the wheel turns, the more people it crushes. Let the names be heard. Rebecca Nurse, elderly and respected, stunned her neighbors by being accused. Her first jury nearly acquitted her, but pressure and confusion led to a guilty verdict. She would not confess a lie to save her life. Sarah Good, poor and proud, maintained she had never harmed a soul. Susanna Martin, sharp of tongue, insisted the devil had no power over her. Martha and Giles Coy refused to bow. Giles, refusing to plead, is pressed under heavy stones, more weight, until his body breaks. His silence prevents the court from seizing his land through a conviction, leaving something for his heirs. John Proctor, a farmer with a temper, calls the afflicted frauds and learns the cost of speaking against the wind. George Burroughs, once a minister, is accused as a leader of witches, when he recites the Lord's Prayer perfectly on the gallows, a thing thought impossible for a witch. The crowd falters, but the court insists that Satan can mimic piety. The hanging proceeds. 19 people in all are executed, and more than 5 die in jail. Some women give birth in chains. Children sleep on cold floors while their parents wait for verdicts they cannot influence. While the noose tightens, money changes hands. Prisoners must pay for their own chains and food. Families go into debt to keep loved ones alive long enough to be tried. Property belonging to the condemned is inventoried and, in some cases, seized or effectively stripped of value. Neighbors watch the ledgers and learn a bitter lesson: justice here carries a price tag. The records do not always say, "We took this because of spite," but the pattern is there. Accusations often travel along the lines of old resentments, contested fields, and church disputes. The trials are not random, they follow the pathways of power. The panic can only last as long as the court's authority holds, and eventually that authority begins to crack. Accusations creep closer to people with status, to those too connected to ignore. Ministers argue among themselves. Cotton Mather, influential and convinced of spiritual warfare, urges caution but does not reject the trials outright. His father, Increase Mather, grows more outspoken. He argues that it is better that 10 suspected witches go free than that one innocent person be condemned, and he warns against relying on spectral evidence. His words travel. They introduce something that had been missing: doubt. The governor reads the mood, and the mood reads the governor. In October 1692, he dissolves the special court. New trials after that point become more cautious. Spectral evidence is questioned or excluded. Juries hesitate. The flood of condemnations slows to a trickle and stops. Prison doors do not all swing open at once, debts and legal knots keep many inside, but the spell over the court is broken. The hangman's work is over. None of this returns the dead to their families. None of this unwinds the fear that rotted the village from the inside. Over the next years, the community tries to make amends, haltingly and unevenly. In 1693, many prisoners are reprieved. In 1697, there is a day of fasting and soul-searching for the tragedy. In 1706, Ann Putnam Jr., one of the most prolific accusers, stands before the church and apologizes. She says she was deluded and deceived by Satan, that she never intended the harm that followed. Her words matter to some and not enough to others. In 1711, the colony passes an act to restore the good names of many of the condemned and to grant compensation to some families. It is real money, but it is not justice. It is not the same thing as undoing a hanging, or handing back years stolen by a prison cell. There are explanations people reach for later, and some of them help us understand pieces of the story. There is the possibility of mass suggestion and the pressure of crowds, the way fear spreads like a draft under a door. There is the trauma of frontier war and the way it made people jump at shadows. Some have pointed to natural causes for strange behavior, like ergot poisoning from moldy rye that can cause convulsions and visions. It remains a hypothesis, not a settled cause, and it cannot explain the legal choices made in the courtroom. What remains constant, however, is the machinery that made the tragedy possible, a theology that expected Satan everywhere, a community split by money and land, a legal system that accepted invisible dreams as proof, and a set of incentives that made confession the safest lie and accusation a tool for safety or gain. Listen closely to how the trials worked, because the pattern is familiar. First, the community is stressed by war, scarcity, or change. Second, there are factions and rivalries that make people quick to see enemies. Third, an authority offers a simple explanation for complex pain: there are witches, or traitors, or enemies within, and promises safety if you help find them. Fourth, the rules of evidence are lowered. Rumors count. Visions count. The word "I saw" pushes out the word "I proved." Fifth, confession becomes a ticket to survival, and denial becomes a path to ruin. Soon the system feeds itself. The more people confess, the more names surface. The more names surface, the more the system seems justified. By the time doubt enters the room, the damage is done. The Salem trials offer a grim education in how quickly this can happen. The officials were not cartoon villains. Many truly believed they were defending their community. Many of the accusers were children caught in adult storms, rewarded with attention they had never known and shaped by pressures we can barely imagine. The blame sits not on one person but on the structure that rewarded fear, turned it into policy, and wrapped it in the language of the sacred and the legal. That structure was built from beliefs, yes, but also from hunger for order, from the desire to protect one's own side, and from the ugly advantage that accusation sometimes offers over a neighbor. The story reaches outward from the courtroom to the fields and kitchens. Imagine the quiet after an execution day. A husband comes home without his wife. A child cries for a mother who will not return. Neighbors avoid eye contact. A minister tries to preach comfort, and his own words taste like ash. The gallows on the hill stands silent but not empty. It holds everything said in anger and uncertainty, and everything not said in doubt. If the trials teach anything worth carrying forward, it is this: fear is a poor judge, and certainty without proof is a dangerous weapon. When leaders design a system that treats dreams as facts, people will die. When communities ignore who benefits from panic, who gains money, land, or status when others are condemned, they will repeat mistakes dressed in new clothes. Due process, skepticism, and compassion are not luxuries for calm times, they are the tools that keep the rope coiled and unused. Remember the names again. Bridget Bishop, the first to hang. Rebecca Nurse, whose goodness could not save her. Sarah Good, who spoke defiance to the end. Susanna Martin, firm and unbending. Martha and Giles Coy, paying with silence and with crushed ribs for a last act of protection. John Proctor, who spoke too boldly and paid with his life. George Burroughs, who prayed perfectly and died anyway. And the others, Mary Eastie, Martha Carrier, and Pudiata, and more, people whose lives were ordinary until the moment the village needed to believe the devil was alive in them. The winter of 1692 passed, as winters do. Snow melted. Fields needed work. Children grew. The village tried to patch what it had torn, and time did what time always does: it dulled the edges without healing the wound. But the record remains, plain and brutal, a ledger of accusations and debts, of warrants and deaths, of property appraisals and petitions begging for mercy. When you read it, the dark truth speaks clearly. There was no witchcraft in Salem. There were only people, afraid, divided, ambitious, devout, making choices inside a system that told them fear was wisdom and suspicion was proof. In the end, the meeting house doors close, the candlelight dies, and the village goes to sleep. The rope is still. The court is gone. The apologies are written. But the question the trials ask of us remains. When fear knocks and asks us to trade fairness for safety, will we open the door? Or will we remember Salem and refuse? That is the story of the Salem Witch Trials. Not a tale of magic, but a caution about us, how quickly we can lose ourselves when we let panic write the law, and how slowly we repair what panic destroys. May we remember the names, guard the rules that protect the innocent, and keep our courts from ever again mistaking shadows for evidence. In 1692, a panic in Salem, Massachusetts led to accusations of witchcraft, arrests, and executions. We're told it was pure superstition. But the real story includes fear, flawed law. Late 1600s New England was religious, strict, and often fearful. Wars and disease were not far away. Communities argued about land, church leadership, and money. In Salem Village, a group of girls began to show strange behavior, fits, screams, and accusations. Ministers and magistrates took it seriously. Witchcraft. Once the first accusations began, pressure built. People named their neighbors. Old conflicts resurfaced. If you had enemies, you were at risk. The legal system allowed spectral evidence, claims that a spirit or specter of the accused had harmed the victim. By modern standards, that's not reliable evidence, but it carried weight at the time. Courts formed quickly. Juries and judges heard dramatic testimony. Confessions, sometimes under pressure, fueled more accusations. Hangings followed. Families lost mothers, fathers, and children. Fear fed on itself. Newspapers and pamphlets spread the panic further. It wasn't just mass hysteria. Several drivers came together. Fear and religion. People believed witchcraft was real. Local conflicts, land disputes, church politics, and personal grudges. Bad legal standards, spectral evidence allowed imagination into the courtroom. Authority and power, leaders needed fast answers and control. As more respected citizens were accused, doubts grew. Some leaders started questioning spectral evidence. Public confidence cracked. The governor eventually halted the trials. Over time, some convictions were reversed. Apologies were made. But the damage was done. The trials show how fear plus weak evidence can destroy lives. When courts lower standards, anyone can be at risk. They also show how rumors travel faster than facts, especially when authority reinforces them. The Salem Witch Trials weren't only superstition. They were also about social tension, power, and a justice system that failed its own people. The victims weren't monsters. They were neighbors caught in a storm of fear and bad law. Call to action. If this helped clear the myths from the facts, subscribe for more straightforward historical true crime. In the comments, tell me which part of the trial surprised you the most. If you found this careful, step-by-step reading of the evidence helpful, subscribe. This channel takes historical controversies and cleans the lens. We separate myth from forensics, romance from records. Next time, we'll follow a secret network that turned murder into ritual.